Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you back at LAURUS Places and People. Brazil is world-renowned for its sunshine, samba, and vibrant joy. But every bright light casts a long shadow. Beyond the postcards of Rio lies a history of bizarre medical experiments, forgotten serial killers, and places so dangerous that humans are legally forbidden from stepping foot on them. Today we're counting down 24 of the darkest and most bizarre trivia facts about the largest nation in South America. Welcome to the dark side of the tropics. Without further ado, let's start our countdown at number 24. Fact 24. There is an island in Brazil where humans are legally banned from visiting because it is infested with thousands of the world's most venomous vipers. Located off the coast of São Paulo, Snake Island is home to the golden lancehead. Their venom is so potent that it literally melts human flesh. Estimates suggest there is one snake for every square meter. The only residents were lighthouse keepers, but legend says the last family was killed by snakes crawling through their windows. Fact 23. The Goiânia accident. The Goiânia accident was a radioactive contamination accident that occurred on September 13, 1987, in Goiânia, Goiás, Brazil, after an unsecured radiotherapy source was stolen from an abandoned hospital site in the city. It was subsequently handled by many people, resulting in 4 deaths. About 112,000 people were examined for radioactive contamination, and 249 of them were found to have been contaminated. In the consequent cleanup operation, topsoil had to be removed from several sites, and several houses were demolished. All the objects from within those houses, including personal possessions, were seized and incinerated. On September 13, 1987, the guard tasked with protecting the site did not show up for work. Roberto dos Santos Alves and Wagner Mota Pereira illegally entered the partially demolished IGR site. They partially disassembled the teletherapy unit and placed the source assembly in a wheelbarrow to later take it to Roberto's home. They thought they might get some scrap value for the unit. They began dismantling the equipment. That same evening, they both began to vomit due to radiation sickness. The following day, Pereira began to experience diarrhea and dizziness, and his left hand began to swell. He later developed a burn on his hand in the same size and shape as the aperture, and he underwent partial amputation of several fingers. Fact 22. The Angel of Death in Brazil. The fact. Nazi war criminal Joseph Mengele lived in Brazil for nearly 20 years and died a free man. The context. The man responsible for horrific experiments at Auschwitz fled to South America. He lived in São Paulo under the name Wolfgang Gerhard. He died in 1979 while swimming at a beach in Bertioga. His identity was only confirmed years later when his body was exhumed. Fact 21. Tiago Henrique Gomes da Rocha was born on 4 February 1988 and is a Brazilian former security guard and serial killer who has claimed to have killed 39 people. He approached his victims on a motorbike and shouted "robbery" before shooting them. However, he never took anything. He targeted homeless people, women and homosexuals in Goiás. 16 of his victims were female, with the youngest being a 14-year-old girl whom he killed in January 2014. Gomes da Rocha was arrested after being caught riding a motorbike with a fake plate. He earlier caught the attention of police after they discovered that he was facing trial for stealing the number plate off a motorbike at a supermarket in Goiânia in January 2014. A motorbike, stolen plates and the suspected murder weapon, a .38 revolver, were retrieved from a home he shared with his mother. He attempted suicide in his prison cell on 16 October 2014 by slashing his wrists with a smashed light bulb. Gomes da Rocha has claimed to have had murderous urges since age 11, when a neighbor sexually abused him. In May 2016, he was convicted of 11 murders and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Fact 20. The Candelaria massacre was a mass killing in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on July 23, 1993. During the night, 8 homeless people, including 6 minors, were killed by a group of men beside the Candelaria church. Several of the men were members of the police and were tried for the killings, but only 2 were convicted. According to survivors, on the morning of July 22, 1993, the day before the massacre, a group of children threw stones at police cars. As the children from the Candelaria church area were usually only given warnings by policemen, the young perpetrators left without worrying too much about the threat. At midnight, several Chevrolet Chevette cars with covered license plates came to a halt in front of the Candelaria church, and the occupants began shooting at the group of roughly 70 street children sleeping in the vicinity of the church. Fact 19. An estimated 60,000 people died due to neglect and abuse inside a single Brazilian psychiatric hospital. The hospital Colônia de Barbacena was used as a dumping ground for undesirables, political dissidents, shy teenagers, and the homeless. Patients were forced to sleep on straw, eat feces, and were subjected to constant electroshock. Bodies were often sold to medical schools to cover the hospital's costs. Fact 18. The Altamira child emasculations were a series of crimes that occurred in the municipality of Altamira, in Pará, Brazil, which involved boys aged 8–14. They were kidnapped, maimed, and killed between 1989 and 1993. According to the Pará authorities, the crimes were committed for satanic rituals and black magic, promoted by the Superior Universal Lineage sect, an occult organization that, among other things, challenged the Western idea of divinity and believed that children were tools of a false god. However, after the case was closed, Maranhão police arrested Francisco das Chagas Rodrigues de Brito, a serial killer who claimed 42 murders committed against children, including 12 in Altamira, which brought uncertainty over the judicial outcome. The accused, who have always claimed to have no involvement with the crimes, asked the court to reinvestigate the cases. Due to the level of violence, the case quickly generated mainstream attention and international repercussions. Fact 17. Brazil was the last country in the Americas to abolish slavery and received nearly 40% of all enslaved Africans brought to the New World. The context: while the US received about 400,000 enslaved people, Brazil received over 4 million. The mortality rate on Brazilian sugar plantations was so high that the population could only be maintained through constant new arrivals, creating a brutal cycle of human trafficking that lasted until 1888. Fact 16. In 1977, the Brazilian Air Force launched a secret mission to investigate light beams that were allegedly burning and sucking blood from citizens in Colares. Locals reported chupa-chupa, suck lights, that left scars and caused anemia. The military investigation produced thousands of pages and hundreds of photos, but the mission was abruptly shut down. The lead officer, Colonel Hollander, gave a shocking interview years later and then committed suicide days later. Fact 15. Francisco Alves Mendes Filho was born on 15th of December 1944 and died on 22nd December 1988. He was a Brazilian rubber tapper, trade union leader, and environmentalist who fought to preserve the Amazon rainforest and advocated for the human rights of Brazilian peasants and indigenous people. A rancher assassinated him on 22nd December 1988. The Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation, a body under the jurisdiction of the Brazilian Ministry of the Environment, is named in his honor. Mendes had received death threats for years before his murder. However, in the months before his death, various pairs of gunmen hired by Silva observed Mendes from a square near his house and in the town. Fact 14. The Carandiru massacre occurred on 2nd October 1992 in Carandiru Penitentiary in São Paulo, Brazil, when military police stormed the penitentiary following a prison riot. The massacre, which left 111 prisoners dead, is considered by many people to be a major human rights violation. Prison director José Ismael Pedrosa was warned that a fight had started between two groups in cell block 9 after a game of football. The groups were led by the inmates Luis Tavares de Azevedo, known as Coelho, and Antonio Luis Nascimento, known as Barba. The fight then escalated into a prison riot that lasted 3 hours. Prisoners were reportedly attacking each other with knives and pipes. The conflict consisted of 2,000 prisoners against 15 guards, who quickly lost control of the prisoners. The prison director attempted to negotiate with the prisoners using a megaphone, but was pushed aside by the military police forces. The deaths took place in the first 4 floors of cell block 9. Fact 13. In 1970, Brazil received the Jules Rimet Trophy in perpetuity after winning the World Cup for a 3rd time, but on 19th December 1983, the trophy was again stolen. A banker and football club agent called Sergio Pereira Aires was the mastermind of the theft. Peralta engaged 2 other men, an ex-police officer called Francisco Rivera and a decorator, José Luis Vieira. The 2 men entered the Brazilian Football Confederation's building and, after incapacitating the night watchman, stole the trophy and 2 other trophies, Equitativa and Jurito. A safecracker, Antonio Seta, aka Broa, revealed that Peralta had also approached him for the job, but he refused out of patriotism, and because his brother had died of a heart attack when Brazil won the Jules Rimet Trophy. Peralta and the rest of the suspects were arrested, and it was claimed that the trophy was melted into gold bars by Juan Carlos Hernandez, an Argentine gold dealer. Hernandez denied the accusation, and the traces of gold found after an analysis of his foundry did not match the material of the trophy. Fact 12. The Curuá Una, sunken forest. A hydroelectric dam flooded the forest, leaving a dead, toxic underwater graveyard. When the Curuá Una Dam was built, the forest wasn't cleared before flooding. The rotting vegetation releases methane and hydrogen sulfide, creating an eerie, toxic underwater graveyard that corrodes turbines. Fact 11. A man in Rio de Janeiro murdered 14 boys and claimed he drank their blood to become as beautiful as them. The context: arrested in 1991, Andrade was a religious fanatic who believed he was saving the children. His crimes were so horrific that he was ruled criminally insane and remains in a high-security psychiatric ward to this day. In this, we move to the next 10 facts. Please remember to subscribe to this channel and share the videos. Fact 10. Henry Ford built a massive American-style town in the middle of the jungle that was abandoned and left to rot. The context: Ford wanted his own rubber supply. He built a town with paved streets, ice cream parlors, and golf courses. However, the rubber trees died from blight, and the American managers couldn't handle the tropical climate or the worker revolts. Today, it is a haunting ruins overgrown by vines. Fact 9. Vampire bat outbreaks in Brazil, particularly in the Amazon region, involve waves of rabies transmission caused by Desmodus rotundus feeding on humans due to ecological disruption. Deforestation, mining, and changing land use have destroyed natural habitats, forcing bats to attack humans in rural areas, resulting in dozens of deaths and thousands of treatments over the past few decades. The cause has majorly been deforestation and mining. Environmental destruction, such as gold mining and deforestation in the Amazon, destroys the natural habitats and prey of vampire bats. Due to shifting diets, displaced bats have adapted to feeding on livestock and, in desperate situations, humans, often biting sleeping individuals on their toes. These bats are the primary carriers of rabies in Brazil, with significant outbreaks recorded in 1990. with 73 deaths and 23 deaths in 2005 in Maranhão state. Although urban rabies has decreased, rural areas still suffer from outbreaks, such as the 2022 rabies deaths among the Maxakali indigenous people in Minas Gerais. Fact 8. The death roads of the Trans-Amazonian Highway. Thousands of workers died during construction. Most of the road is now impassable. Built during the 1970s military dictatorship, workers died from malaria, yellow fever, and indigenous attacks. Huge sections are now swallowed by mud and jungle, a multi-billion-dollar monument to hubris and death. Fact 7. Brasilia's design fallout stems from a utopian car-centric plan by Lucio Costa and Oscar Niemeyer that, while architecturally stunning, failed as a livable city, creating social segregation, functional inefficiency, and economic chaos. The aeroplane plan ignored organic pedestrian growth, leading to suburban slums, while the monumental architecture favored form over function. Key aspects of the design: fallout, anti-urban design. Critics argued that Brasilia isn't a city but an office campus for government, lacking messy, mixed-use streets, which causes residents to leave on weekends. The social divide: the planned modern city centre became a high-income exclusive area, forcing workers into unplanned, impoverished satellite towns, periphery slums. Functional failures: the car-focused design and zoning separated residential, working, and leisure areas, rendering it unlivable without a car. The iconic sprawling architecture, such as the cathedral, often proved impractical, with glass structures creating immense heat. Rapid construction between 1956 and 1960 to meet President Kubitschek's deadline caused massive inflation and overspending and contributed to political instability, leading to the 1964 military coup. Architectural disdain: after initial admiration, the city became a subject of derision, often labeled the moon's backside, representing the failure of modernist utopias. Fact 6. The body snatchers of the 19th century. During the yellow fever epidemics, corpse takers were paid by the body, leading them to take people who were still alive. The context: fear of contagion was so high that people found unconscious or in deep fevers were often tossed into carts and buried in mass graves before they had actually passed away. Fact 5. During the 1960s and 70s, the Brazilian military allegedly used chemical weapons and napalm against indigenous tribes. During the Brazilian military dictatorship, 1964-1985, reports indicate that state agents and the Indian Protection Service, SPI, were involved in actions that resulted in significant harm to indigenous populations. Historical documents such as the Figueiredo report suggest that tactics were employed that led to the deaths of indigenous people during efforts to open up their lands for development. Accounts describe the distribution of contaminated supplies and the use of toxic substances. Further testimony and investigations by groups like the National Truth Commission have highlighted intentional acts that contributed to the decline of indigenous populations. These actions included the deliberate spread of diseases among tribes and the use of incendiary materials in attacks on villages. Such operations are reported to have caused a significant number of deaths among indigenous people during this period. To clear land for highways, planes dropped chemicals on the Waimiri Atroari people. The Figueiredo report disappeared for 45 years before being found in 2012, revealing a hidden genocide. Fact 4. The detailed story of Nazi head shrinkers in Brazil is largely a blend of actual World War II atrocities discovered in Europe and the post-war flight of high-profile Nazis to South America. While there is no historical evidence of a head-shrinking Nazi cult operating in Brazil, the connection stems from two distinct historical realities. 1. The Buchenwald shrunken heads. The most famous Nazi shrunken heads were actually discovered in Germany, not Brazil. When US forces liberated the Buchenwald concentration camp in April 1945, they found 2 shrunken human heads alongside pieces of tattooed human skin. One head was identified as an executed Polish prisoner. The method: SS guards reportedly forced a Czech scientist, a prisoner, to use techniques learned from the Jivaro Shuar people of the Amazon, found in Ecuador, Peru, and parts of Brazil, to shrink the heads. The purpose: these were kept as macabre trophies and were later presented as evidence of Nazi atrocities during the Nuremberg trials. The Brazil connection, Josef Mengele. The Brazil part of the story usually involves Josef Mengele, the notorious angel of death from Auschwitz. The escape. After the war, Mengele fled to South America, eventually settling in São Paulo, Brazil, in 1960. The Twin Town mystery. Rumors persisted for decades that Mengele continued his horrific genetic experiments in the Brazilian outback. Specifically, the town of Candido Godoy became famous for a high rate of blonde, blue-eyed twins, leading to sensationalist claims and a National Geographic investigation that he had successfully engineered an Aryan enclave. Cultural context and fakes. The Jivaroan practice of making tsantsas, shrunken heads, is native to the Amazon basin, which spans into northern Brazil. Because many early 20th century explorers and tourists sought these as curiosities, a large market for counterfeit shrunken heads made from sloths, monkeys, or morgue corpses emerged in South American trade hubs. Reality: Nazis did shrink heads at Buchenwald, Germany, using Amazonian methods. Top Nazis like Mengele and Franz Stangl hid in Brazil for decades. Fact 3. The Cangaço head display was a macabre public exhibition of the severed heads of the famous Brazilian bandit leader Lampião, his partner Maria Bonita, and 9 of their followers following their death in 1938. This event marked the symbolic end of the Cangaço era of social banditry in the Brazilian northeast. The ambush and decapitation on July 28, 1938, a police unit known as Volantes ambushed the gang at their hideout in Angico, Sergipe, after being tipped off by a traitor. Lampião, Maria Bonita, and 9 others were killed and immediately beheaded by the troops. The heads were salted and placed in kerosene cans filled with brandy and lime, or brine, for preservation during transport. The heads were used as trophies to prove the end of the gang's invulnerability and to intimidate other bandits. The heads were first displayed on the steps of the City Hall in Piranhas, Alagoas, and then paraded through various towns in the northeast. They were sent to the State Forensic Institute in Salvador, Bahia, where they were autopsied by Dr. José Lages Filho. The scientists used the criminal anthropology theories of Cesare Lombroso to search for inborn criminal traits in their physical features. Long-term display. For decades, the heads remained on public display at the Museum of the Faculty of Medicine and later, the Nina Rodriguez Museum in Salvador. After a long legal and public pressure campaign by the families of the deceased to stop the macabre exhibit, a law was enacted in 1965 to allow for their burial. The heads of Lampião and Maria Bonita were finally laid to rest on February 6, 1969, at the Quinta Cemetery in Salvador, more than 30 years after their deaths. Fact 2. The massacre of the 11th parallel, also known as the Xintalaga massacre, occurred in November 1963 in the Mato Grosso region of Brazil. Orchestrated by Antonio Mascarenhas Junqueira, head of the rubber firm Arruda Junqueira & Conde, the attack was a deliberate attempt to eliminate the Xintalaga indigenous people who were considered parasites, obstructing commercial rubber extraction. The atrocity began when a light aircraft flew over a village and dropped sticks of dynamite onto the inhabitants below. Following the aerial bombardment, hired gunmen invaded the village on foot to finish off survivors with machine guns and machetes. In one of the most infamous accounts, a breastfeeding woman was murdered after her child was shot and her body was hung upside down and sliced in half. The massacre gained international attention through the Figueiredo Report of 1967, a 7,000-page document that detailed widespread genocide, torture, and bacteriological warfare against indigenous tribes. While initial reports indicated around 30 deaths in this specific incident, broader estimates suggest the ongoing violence against the Sintalaga during this period claimed as many as 3,500 lives. Despite 134 officials being charged with over 1,000 crimes related to these atrocities, none were jailed, and the primary architect died without facing trial. The global outcry led to the founding of Survival International and the replacement of the corrupt Indian Protection Service, SPI, with FUNAI. Fact 1. The Pororoca is a colossal tidal bore formed where the Atlantic Ocean's powerful high tide meets the outflowing Amazon River, creating a thunderous wall of water that can reach heights of 4 meters, 13 feet. This phenomenon is most intense during the biannual equinoxes in March and September, when the alignment of the sun and moon maximizes gravitational pull. The surge travels as far as 800 kilometers, 500 miles inland at speeds of up to 30 kilometers per hour, carrying a massive roar that local indigenous Tupi people use to name the event. While it has become a bucket list destination for extreme surfers who have set records by riding a single wave for over 37 minutes, the Pororoca is fundamentally a destructive force that erodes entire riverbanks and uproots trees in its path. The dangerous and fatal potential of the Pororoca over the last 50 years stems from its Amazonian tsunami characteristics, which combine extreme physical force with lethal environmental hazards. Fatalities and serious injuries often result from blunt force trauma caused by massive debris, such as floating logs and entire trees, or from surfers being knocked unconscious against shallow, shifting mudbanks. The surge also displaces hazardous wildlife, concentrating piranhas, caimans, and venomous snakes in the churning, opaque brown water where visibility is zero. Beyond the immediate risk to surfers, the wave has historically been synonymous with tragedy for local communities. It has nearly destroyed entire riverside towns like São Domingos do Capim, capsized countless small boats, and caused drownings among residents caught off guard by its sudden, violent arrival. Brazil's beauty is undeniable, but its shadows are deep. These facts remind us that every nation can have a dark side that challenges the stories we tell ourselves. Which of these facts will keep you thinking? Let us know in the comments. Please remember to subscribe to this channel and share the videos.